Jeumont, 51-Minute Stop, A Detective Tale by Georges Simenon. Through the fog of deep sleep, Maigret barely registered the ringing. It wasn't just background noise, it was the telephone, and his wife was already leaning over him to answer. "It's Paulie," she said, nudging him awake. "He needs to talk to you." "Paulie?" Maigret grumbled, still half asleep. "Yeah, Nunc, it's me," came the familiar voice on the other end. It was 3 in the morning. The room was warm, but outside the world was frozen stiff. The window panes laced with frost gave a hint of just how bitter it was out there, and up in Jeumont, where Paulie was calling from, the cold was even sharper. "What? Say that again? Hold on, let me write it down. Otto? Spell it for me just to be sure." Madame Maigret, watching her husband scribble in the dim light, had only one concern. Would he have to get up? Of course he would. And naturally he grumbled about it. "Something strange is going on," he explained as he pulled on his clothes. "Paulie decided to detain an entire train car. Paulifal Vengeance wasn't just family. He was also a police inspector stationed at the Belgian border." "Where are you heading?" Madame Maigret asked. "First headquarters to get some background. Then I'll probably jump on the next train." Trouble always seemed to find the 16A train that left Berlin at 11 a.m. carrying a few cars from Warsaw. By the time it rolled into Liège at 11:44 p.m., the station was practically deserted, closing the moment the train pulled away. At 1:57 a.m. it reached Erkelinjes, where Belgian customs officers, with little else to do, took a lazy stroll through the cars, peering into compartments before hurrying back to their warm station house. By 2:14 a.m. the train lurched forward, crossing into France and arriving at Jeumont just 3 minutes later. "Jeumont," a porter's voice echoed along the frozen platform, his lamp bobbing in the darkness. 51-minute stop." Most passengers remained curled up in their compartments, the lights dimmed, curtains drawn, clinging to whatever warmth they could find. "Second and third-class passengers off for customs." Paul Vinchon stood near the first-class cars, frowning. There were more open curtains, more bright lights than usual. Odd. He approached the conductor. "Why so many first-class passengers tonight?" "International Dentist Conference in Paris tomorrow. We've got at least 25 of 'em on board, along with the usual travelers." Vinchon stepped into the leading car, moving down the corridor, sliding open doors, his voice low but firm. "Passports ready, please." In dimly lit compartments he flicked on lights, rousing sleepy passengers. Faces emerged from the shadows, heavy with exhaustion. 5 minutes later, heading back down the corridor, he passed customs officers clearing first, ushering passengers into the aisle while they checked under seats and searched every possible hiding place. Passports, identity cards. One carriage stood out, a plush, red-upholstered German car. Normally it seated 4 passengers, but tonight, thanks to the dentist influx, there were 6. Vinchon barely glanced at most of them. But in the corner next to the corridor sat an elegant woman with an Austrian passport. She caught his eye for a moment, striking. Then his focus shifted to the man in the far seat, swaddled in a heavy rug, unmoving. "Passport," Vinchon said, tapping him on the shoulder. No reaction. Around him passengers were already opening their luggage for customs. Vinchon frowned, shook the man's shoulder. The body slumped sideways. A second later he knew. The man wasn't sleeping. He was dead. The scene exploded into chaos. The narrow corridor was instantly crammed with people craning their necks, whispering in hushed voices. When a stretcher finally arrived, moving the man proved a struggle. He was far heavier than expected. "Take him to the first aid post," Vinchon ordered, scanning the car for answers. He flagged down a German doctor traveling on the train. At the same time, he posted a customs officer at the compartment door. No one in, no one out. Only the Austrian woman tried to leave for some fresh air. When stopped, she merely shrugged, unimpressed. "What did he die of?" Vinchon asked the doctor. The doctor hesitated. Even after undressing the body, there was no obvious wound. Then, finally, with Vinchon's help, he found it, a barely visible mark on the man's chest. "Someone pierced his heart with a needle," the doctor murmured. The train had just 12 minutes left before departure. The station special inspector was nowhere in sight. Vinchon, pulse pounding, had to think fast. He sprinted to the station master's office. "Uncouple that car," he ordered. Back on the platform, passengers exchanged nervous glances. No one knew exactly what was happening, but one thing was clear. Jeumont had just become the scene of a murder. The passengers in the adjacent compartments grumbled when they were told that one car would remain in Jeumont and that they needed to find new seats. But those who had shared a compartment with the dead man were even more upset when Inspector Paul Vinchon informed them they'd have to stay overnight. It wasn't up for debate. One of them was a murderer. As the train pulled away, now short one car and 6 passengers, Vinchon felt a wave of uncertainty. He wasted no time and called his uncle, the legendary Inspector Maigret. By 3:45 a.m., Maigret was at the Quai des Orfèvres, the Paris police headquarters. The office was dimly lit, and he asked the night sergeant for coffee. At 4 a.m., pipe smoke curling in the air, he was already on the phone with Berlin, gathering intel on the passengers Vinchon had detained. Next, he called Vienna and Warsaw, piecing together details about those aboard. Meanwhile, at the Jeumont station, Vinchon did his best to manage the suspects, each reacting in their own way. A massive station stove roared in the background, swallowing coal as fast as it was fed. Stiff wooden chairs were brought in, offering little comfort. "I assure you I'm moving as fast as I can," Vinchon told them, "but you'll have to be patient." Then the phone rang. "Aulnoy station? What happened?" Vinchon listened, his expression sharpening. "I see. Yes, send him over. And the package." A man had been caught sneaking under a train in Aulnoy, carrying a wax-sealed bundle of bearer bonds. Oil securities worth a fortune. His name was Jeff Bebelmans, an acrobat from Antwerp. He was already on his way to Jeumont. By dawn, fatigue had dulled the detainees' protests. The frostbitten morning light made everything feel even colder. At 10:20 a.m., Maigret arrived. By 11, on a deserted siding, the crime was reenacted. It was eerie, gray skies, bitter cold, and tired faces. A woman's nervous laughter broke the silence. Someone had helped herself to too many warming drinks. "Put the body back in its seat," Maigret instructed. "The curtains, were they drawn?" "They haven't been touched," Vinchon assured him. The victim, Otto Braun, 58, once a banker in Stuttgart, looked the part, well-dressed, stout, his hair neatly trimmed. A hotel bill from Berlin's Kaiserhof was found in his pocket. Reports trickled in. Berlin confirmed he had once donated 1,000,000 marks to the ruling party, but had kept a low profile since. Vienna's file on one passenger, Elaine Blindbox, described her as a high-class courtesan with ties to powerful men. Another traveler, Thomas Haug, had a record for dealing in stolen jewelry and was suspected of drug smuggling. Seated back in their original spots, the 5 remaining passengers eyed Maigret warily. "Who boarded at Berlin?" Maigret asked. A Frenchman, Adolphe Bonvoisin, raised his hand. "I did, and so did Madame Irvich," he said, nodding toward a fur-clad woman from Vilna who was headed to Paris for medical treatment. The last 2 men remained silent until Maigret pressed them. "Name?" "Thomas Hauke," said the tall, stern-looking German. "Dr. Gellhorn from Brussels," said the bespectacled, bald-headed man. When Maigret asked why Gellhorn hadn't checked on Braun when he slumped over, the man huffed. "I'm not a medical doctor. I'm an archaeologist." And so there they sat, Otto Braun lifeless in his seat, and the remaining 5 very much alive, yet equally insistent they knew nothing. Maigret had spent 15 minutes alone with Jeff Bebelmans, the Antwerp acrobat found hiding under a train in Aulnoy, clutching over $2 million in bearer bonds. When shown the corpse, Bebelmans barely reacted. "Who is it?" he asked, unfazed. "His third-class ticket from Berlin to Paris didn't explain why he had traveled part of the way clinging beneath a car, likely to dodge customs. But he wasn't one for explanations. You ask questions, I say nothing," he quipped. The report on him was thin. Once an acrobat, later a nightclub waiter in Heidelberg and Berlin. Maigret moved on, puffing his pipe. "You, Bonvoisin, and Madame Irvich boarded in Warsaw. Who got in at Berlin?" Bonvoisin gestured toward Lena Leinbach. "She did." Maigret eyed her crocodile-skin luggage stacked above the dead man's seat. "So you placed your bags there and sat diagonally opposite?" She nodded. "And Braun?" "He arrived next," Bonvoisin supplied eagerly. "No luggage, just a travel rug." A check of Braun's wallet revealed a baggage claim ticket. His belongings had already reached Paris, and Maigret ordered them searched. Next he turned to Hauck. "You boarded at Cologne?" Hauck corrected him. "I changed compartments there. I was in a non-smoker." Dr. Gellhorn had also boarded at Cologne. As Maigret muttered his way through questions, Vinchon jotted notes swiftly. Bonvoisin's statement stood out. Before the German border, no one seemed to know each other except him and Madame Irvich. After customs, the lights were dimmed, and everyone dozed. At Liège, Lena tried to step into the corridor, but Braun stopped her. "Stay where you are," he told her in German. She tried again at Namur, but the moment she moved, Braun, who seemed asleep, stirred, and she hesitated. At Charleroi, they spoke again, but Bonvois, slipping into sleep, barely caught it. Sometime between Charleroi and Jeumont, within an hour and a half, someone made their move, a needle, straight to Braun's heart. Bonvoisin, seated nearest, wouldn't have needed to stand. Hauke, directly opposite, had the next best position. Gellhorn came after, and the women were the furthest. Despite the cold, sweat beaded Maigret's forehead. Lena glared at him. Madame Irvich, complaining of rheumatism, chattered in Polish to Bonvoisin.